COVID was a real intense season in our life because a lot of people that we love disavowed us. And then a lot of people that we didn't know became our new friends. I think we've come out on a way better side of it.
Some people risk their lives to practice their faith. Do you think that Americans in some way take that freedom for granted, freedom to worship?
There's something about the most powerful man in the world with the biggest platform in the world saying, hey guys, I need prayer.
Sean, thanks so much for joining Battleground. I'm so excited to have you. You know, one of the reasons, not to just jump right into it, but like, first of all, you spell your name the right way, just like me, S-E-A-N,
Yeah.
which I like.
Yeah.
So we're brothers in that regard. But man, you were doing some amazing stuff in the world. You know, you're a faith leader, you're a worship leader, you're an evangelist, you're a musician, you're an activist. And, you know, I'm Catholic, right? I'm a believer. I'm spiritual. And one of the things, Sean, that as someone who loves this country, I do see that there is a spiritual war happening in America right now. And I feel like, Sean, I feel like so many people aren't aware of that fight and they're not tuned in. And it upsets me sometimes when I see priests in my faith, in the Catholic faith, not standing up and doing something about it or saying something about it or speaking to it. But what I admire about you is that you don't worry about that. You build a movement and you're not afraid to push back against the radicalism of the woke left.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think for me, what's been enormously helpful in my journey is the amount of time that I spent with the persecuted and underground church across the world. And so because my parents were full-time missionaries and I grew up going to a lot of places where it's illegal to preach the gospel, you can get thrown in prison, you can, believers are put to death. And I've spent a ton of time in the Middle East, a ton of time in Southeast Asia, and I've been in those communities and I've been with those leaders. I've begun to realize the importance of resistance and the importance of pushing back, and even the theological precedent that the book of Acts sets for us. And basically the whole book of Acts is basically the disciples getting in trouble, getting thrown in prison, getting freed, and the church grows. And the gospel always confronts the powers of the culture, always. And so I think now what's wild about that is I haven't really been able to put what I learned into practice in the West or in America until COVID happened. And that was the first time, at least in my lifetime, where the government actually came down on the church, trying to tell the church when and how they could worship God. And that's when something flipped off of me. And, that was the start of, and then of course, now we're in, a battle for free speech, and we're in a battle for, with the transgender agenda and the sexualization of our kids and what can be taught and all that stuff. So, but for me, COVID in many ways was the switch that kind of turned me on to that battle being real in our nation.
Well, Sean, I've seen just having been in Afghanistan, I spent some time in South Korea, and I've seen other places in the world.
Yeah.
And I've seen what people have to risk in order to practice their faith. And as you mentioned very eloquently, that some people risk their lives to practice their faith. And I feel like maybe do you think that Americans in some way take that freedom for granted, freedom to worship? And do you think that people take that for granted?
I mean, I think that, people haven't ever had that pushback. They haven't had that resistance. And so because they haven't had that, they haven't developed those muscles, to know that, hey, listen, like, that what switched me on in the COVID era was, hey, these guys don't care about your health. They don't care about your safety. They don't care about science. They actually are purposely wanting the church to shut up. How do we know that? Well, because strip clubs and casinos are open. They're doing BLM rallies that are massive outdoor in the streets, but yet they're attacking a worship and prayer event that's peaceful, that wants to bring hope and healing. Like that's what they're attacking rather, and it really, the amazing thing about it, Sean, was it uncovered the enormous bias and the hypocrisy that was taking place. And it was like, no, 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 all along, all you wanted to do was shut the church up. This just gave you an excuse. And I think that that's the kind of thing that we really haven't seen out in the open. I mean, now you're starting to see just the outright animosity towards the church, towards people of faith. You're seeing pro-life pregnancy centers firebombed. You're seeing churches attacked. We had a church attacked on New Year's Eve in San Diego. Antifa attacked the church that we were worshiping. I mean, they attacked a church in America, busted windows out, sprayed graffiti and obscenities all over the church property. Did the mayor say anything? No. Did the governor say anything? Of course not. Did anyone do anything? No. You're seeing outright animosity. It's not just there's no more toleration. You saw it with the Grammys, a full blown Satan
Yes.
sexual orgy happening at the Grammys a few nights ago. I mean, we're in a spiritual battle. I mean, there is no more. I don't know. Is it a conspiracy? No, no, it's right out in front of us.
It's right. It's right out in front of us. And I was just thinking as you were talking about the Grammys, and I shared a clip of that, and I said, like hell brought to you by Pfizer. I mean, they literally went through this
Right,
satanic ritual in front of,
right,
the dwindling viewership of the Grammys. I think 9 million people watched that, but you know. People said to me, like, well, why are you sharing this? Like, this is what they want. They want people to watch this, and I, by the way, I understand that perspective, but we have to, I think, in many ways, when we're confronted with things like that, is
hmm,
put on the armor of God and face it down. Because even though I don't believe that stuff, it's not going to affect me and my faith. But
yeah,
maybe my kids or other people's kids are watching it
yeah,
and being influenced by those people,
right,
and we have to stand up to it. We have to
yeah,
offer our children and the American people, I think, another path forward. And I mean, I've
yeah,
had like I watched the segment of the church out in San Diego being vandalized by Antifa. That's something else
yeah,
that we have in common. Antifa, when I was running for Congress, came to my house, spray painted my house, vandalized my house, place where my children sleep, Sean. And the left the left or the radicals or the revolutionaries, whatever you want to call them in this country, it seems and feels like they're always on the move. They're always
yeah,
active. And what I admire about what you're doing is that whether you're in Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan doing missionary work, or you're here at home, you are doing things, right? You are building a movement. And I think in doing so, you're showing the American people another way, Sean, because
mm,
people in today's day and age, maybe they're not wired into politics 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, like I am. But I do think people just have a general sense that something is not right, and they're
mm,
desperately looking for leadership.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely in a leadership vacuum right now. I think politically, I think in the faith space, I think people are floundering a little bit. They're looking for guidance. They're looking for truth. I think that is why it's important that we speak out. I was having this conversation with some really well-known artists and musicians and people about the Grammy situation. I said, listen, we have a platform of people that follow us. We influence people. They look to us like it's our job as people of faith to make it very clear that this is a demonic ideology that wants to pervert and sexualize and destroy our family. Like the enemy is not even like it's so brazen now. It's not even like trying to hide it or sneak it. It's just out in the open, and you have CBS, their main Twitter feed saying we're ready to worship to
Yeah.
to a full blown satanic orgy. I mean, you have literally it's like the corporate media, big pharma, government officials in bed with this demonic ideology, and it has one goal: to seek, to destroy, to devour, to steal. I mean, that the Bible's very clear. The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that you can have life and life more abundantly. And I think that we're seeing those three things, those three agendas of the enemy really play out. And so it's very important that, although it may seem controversial, or it may seem overreactionary or whatever. Like, I have four kids. They're growing up in this culture. They're going to face things in their lifetime that I never even dreamed of in the 90s,
Hmm.
and they have to be prepared. They have to be ready. They have to be alert. The devil seeks around like a roaring lion, discovering who he can devour. That is what the enemy is doing right now. And so, yeah, it is important. It is important to push back. It is important to put on the armor of God, to be alert. I mean, God is still moving. He's still doing incredible things, but darkness is increasing as well. People ask me a lot, well, Sean, as we approach these last days, is the darkness going to get darker? Is the light going to get lighter? And I always tell people both. They're going to
Hmm.
rise together, and we're going to see the darkest of the dark and the lightest of the light. So it's going to be wild days ahead of us for sure.
Sean, take me back to the beginning, and how, I feel like people like you either have an upbringing where they're raised in the faith and they're always on the
Hmm.
straight and narrow, or maybe they strayed from the path at some point earlier in their life and then something brought them back to it and they were inspired to sort of jump back into their faith. Like, which one were you? Were you somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, so I grew up, as I mentioned before, my parents were full-time medical missionaries, and I grew up actually in Montana. Which is why it's really funny that I'm in California right now, because the commonality of Montanans is they hate Californians. So, um, but God has a sense of humor. But yeah, I was in Montana, and then we moved to the East Coast. My parents were working and pioneering this massive missions organization. And I think I just grew up like every other kid, being drugged to church and kind of in that whole thing, and going through the motions. And then I really had an encounter with God, and that took place when I was in high school. And I was definitely a driven kid. I was a high school quarterback. We won the state championship. I was involved. I was doing music, other things. But yeah, that encounter with God really changed me. And my first ever mission trip by myself that I went on some with my parents when I was younger, but then I went on one in '02 to Afghanistan in the Taliban, kind of in the post 9/11 era. And that was something that really wrecked me, just seeing what's happening over there, but also seeing God moving in the midst of that, the war, the craziness. And yeah, I mean, I think probably my biggest struggle from then pioneering ministry in various areas of my life has always been, through the drama of the church stuff, and seeing the rise and fall of movements, and being a part of different denominations, or music groups or whatever, is just like kind of keeping my heart pure before the Lord as you walk through those seasons. Because a lot of times, you see people, and you think they're awesome, and you admire them, and then you get up closer and you realize they got issues, and they're not they're not all together. And then sometimes those same type of people, desert you and ghost you. And for me, COVID was a real intense season in our life, because it really was like a polarizing force. A lot of people that we love disavowed us, and kind of bailed on us. And then a lot of people that we didn't know became our new friends. So I feel like even that, I mean, high school was one amazing thing, but I think even in COVID, it was like a total rearranging of our world. I think we've come out on a way better side of it, but it was definitely challenging in the midst of it.
Well, you talk about an experience with God. I feel like I've had one as well. I don't talk about it very often because I feel like people will like ridicule me or say it didn't happen or say that I'm
Yeah.
crazy. But um, I was in Afghanistan, and I was there for 16 months, and we were in Eastern Afghanistan, and like you, I mean, that experience, I mean, the experience of war, it affects you in a lot of different ways.
Hmm.
It wasn't even necessarily fighting the enemy, which is sort of what we were
Right.
trained to do, or
Right.
fighting against that evil. And I truly believe the enemy that we were facing there is evil, but it was just
Right.
the people of Afghanistan who were caught in the middle, who just wanted to live
Right.
their lives. Um,
Right.
but I was wounded in Afghanistan. We were being overrun. I was knocked unconscious, and I'm telling you, I wrote about this in my first book a little bit, but I'm telling you, like, it's like in that moment when I was out, didn't know really whether I was going to live or die. Like, I felt God there. I felt him.
Wow.
And he was there. And someone was telling me to wake up. And prior to me going to Afghanistan, my grandfather, like literally the day I went to Afghanistan, he passed away. He was like a second father figure to me. And I could have sworn I heard him. I could have sworn I saw him. And I don't talk about that. And since that day, I kind of think back on that and I say, well, that's just your brain playing tricks on you.
Mm.
Your brain was deprived of oxygen, so clearly you're just hallucinating. But there was something about that experience that stuck with
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And what does it say about the world that we live in today, Sean, where I almost rationalize myself away from that experience, that it maybe didn't happen, or I'm just conjuring it up.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people, hey, listen, either way, you got to have faith. If you have faith that you're some cosmic energy that exploded out of nowhere, that's a lot of faith. I don't think I
Yeah.
got that much faith, you know.
Yeah.
But and then you got to have faith to carry on to these genuine moments where you felt God or you felt His nearness or you felt. I mean, I've had those similar to what you're saying. I mean, I had an AK-47 to my skull, grinding my head into the ground in Kampala, Uganda. And the end of a mission trip that I did is these Zulu thugs were robbing me, taking all of our stuff.
Oh my God.
Normally they kill. Normally they kill people so they're not identified. Because if they're identified as thieves, a lot of times they're burned alive. It's crazy. And in that moment, I felt God too. And I think that like that's what people don't realize is he's an Bible says he's an ever present help in time of need. And I think that a lot of times, even when our hearts aren't turned to him, or maybe even we're not aware of him, he rushes in moments like that, and it's undeniable. And he doesn't do it because we're the best people. He doesn't do it because we're sinless. He does it because he loves us, And so those are the moments I think that you carry with you, so that hey, I was at my darkest, or I was at a moment where I was knocked out, or what your situation, and I know that God was there. I know that He's with me. That is, it takes faith to believe that too. And um, everybody, this world they want to live in perpetual independence, so that they don't have that nobody helped them. They don't have any God that's with them, and they're not accountable to anyone. But in their heart of hearts, they know that at the end of the day, that they are accountable to someone. And I think that that's
Do you?
that's where that's where. Anyway, yeah, keep going.
No, I was just going to ask you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to ask
No,
you. Do you or have you ever wavered in your faith at all? Because I know I have from time to time, and
yeah,
not that I don't believe. I always believe, but sometimes I find myself
yeah,
thinking, you know, God, things just suck so bad right now. Or there's so
yeah,
much pain and suffering in this world, and sometimes it seems like it's hopeless. And like you said it yourself, like as someone who sees this, I think this spiritual fight, I see it. But when you
mhm,
have the deck stacked against you, like when you're talking about big corporation, big tech,
yeah,
big pharma, big media, our schools now seem to be
right, right,
infiltrated.
yeah.
What what do you how do you keep strong in your faith during those moments?
Yeah, I mean, I pity the people that don't have God, I feel really bad for them because the world is getting crazy. And it's like, man, if you don't have that firm foundation, if you haven't built your house on the rock, as the storms come, you're just going to get swept away. And I've seen so many people do that, out of discouragement and disillusion. And I mean, you talk about things that we've seen with Let Us Worship across America, the suicide, drugs, alcoholism, depression. I mean, it's just rampant across America, and it's all ramped up by this media machine and by this polarization of culture, and of course the lockdowns didn't help that. It just exacerbated the situation. Um, but yeah, I mean, I feel like I think we all go through struggles where we feel like the deck's decked up against us, and that's when we need God the most. And I think that's when our faith really matters. That's when it comes that's when it's like the rubber meets the road, and it's like, do we really believe? Those are those moments. And for people out there that, I think it's an incredible opportunity. You wouldn't believe the amount of people, Sean, as we went city to city, hosting these worship, prayer, and healing things. And we didn't just go to like red states. I mean, we went to blue. We went into Seattle. We went into LA. We went to Chicago. We went into New York. We got attacked. We got fined. We got persecuted. But the amount of people in those places that are just like looking for hope was outrageous. I mean, their cities are destroyed. They're being totally run down. Their mayors and their governors and their city officials are just out of their minds. And there's really good people there, and they're looking for hope. And so when we showed up, I mean, the amount of people that came down to the altar or wanted prayer or wanted to get baptized or wanted to get plugged into a local church congregation. I mean, it was wild. And it was very hopeful to me because I felt like, man, am I the only one that's like this? Our nation's jacked up right now. Like, we need God, we need help. But I wasn't the only one. People felt that all across America. And so it did give
In
me a lot of hope.
well, in those moments, Sean, like how you talk about in those moments that you're feeling hopeless, like for the people that are watching, how do you find God in those moments? How do you stay strong in your faith?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it comes down to a personal relationship. It's like I encourage people a lot, even people that are not either they wouldn't call themselves religious, which I don't actually call myself religious. I have a relationship with God, and it's not a form to me. But like when you read through the book of Psalms, you see David consistently vocalizing his honesty no matter what season he's in. So he's, God, they're after me. God, I don't know what to do. Help me. He's a little bit more dramatic, obviously. He's like, they're going to come and tear my skin off my bones and wild animals are devour me, But I think it's important for people, no matter the season they're in, to like vocalize to God. Like he wants to hear you. He wants to hear your heart. And I think there's even a connection that comes and a vulnerability that comes in those moments. And that's my encouragement. And I think the other thing is like, you know, this is a great season in 2023, to kick off the new year, to get rid of the naysayers around you. Get rid of those people that are cynics and skeptics and constantly pull you down, and find some people that believe in something. I mean, give me a break. Like, find some people that like know what they're doing in life and know who God is and know where they're going. There's a lot of great people out there, and that's my encouragement. Try to go to church. That's always helpful. Yeah, there are some fakes there, but there's some real people. You know, uh, going after God in the midst of their life.
I think it's such good advice, Sean. I think I feel like I've always struggled with not my faith. That's not the right way to say it. I'm not struggling with my faith, but I always wrestle with it. And for me, when I was growing up, I was in public school. I really wasn't. I wasn't
Yeah,
like it wasn't resonating with me. Um, And then I ended up going to Catholic school my junior and senior year of high school, and then I went to Catholic college. But there was something that happened when I braided my faith with my education that really made a huge difference in my life, Sean. And it seems like you had a similar experience in that
Yeah.
you're a faith leader, but you also at some point ran for Congress in 2020, right?
Yeah.
So at some point
Yeah.
you braided your faith and your desire to serve in
Yeah.
the faith with serving your country in
Hmm.
Washington.
Yeah.
Where did that inspiration come from?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I think that when I when I was in high school and I had that encounter with God, and I told the Lord, I said, I'll go anywhere, I'll do anything. And I was more thinking, I'll go to China, I'll go to Indonesia, I'll go to these nations, and I'll be your voice and your hands and feet and whatever. And I did do that. But then there came a season where I felt like God was calling me to politics, and He reminded me, hey, remember when you gave me your yes? You didn't say I will only just go to these nations, like, and I began to see how dark and gnarly the political realm was, and so I just pictured myself as a missionary of sorts. I'm like, all right, well, it's dark, it's difficult, it's hard. We've seen this in other nations before. And I raised my hand. And to be honest, at the time, I felt like I kind of got tricked into it because I had no idea how difficult it was going to be. I mean, dude, I ran for a seat in the Bay Area in Pelosi's backyard. I like it was not. I thought it was going to be more like purple. It was definitely blue. It was not purple. Um, and I got exposed to so much. Like I saw stuff. I peeked behind the curtain in the political realm. I saw things I can't unsee. And and what was interesting about it was is it wasn't just like on a local level. Of course, at local level politics and California and the GOP and Republicans. And by the way, the Republicans were the ones that actually took me out. It wasn't the
Oh,
Dems. Surprise, surprise. But I found myself in the Oval Office uh, like a month after I announced, 2 months after I announced, I found myself in the Oval Office praying over President Trump. And God opened these doors into crazy places that I never thought that I would go. And I started to realize, man, like I can't disassociate my faith and my calling to be the hands and feet of Jesus. I can't separate that from the political realm. This has to go with me in all areas of my life. And then I started to realize this is why we're in the place that we're in America, because too many believers, too many good people separated their faith from their politics. And it's like, no, 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 we can't actually do that. Like, we have to bring our faith into all areas of our life. And this is what people hate. This is why they call me a Christian nationalist. This is why they call, I mean, whatever. They go on and on and on with their things because they don't want your faith. They don't want the light. They don't want God in that realm. There's a strong agenda to shut God out. We've seen it with prayer in schools. We've seen it with, I mean, even during the Pelosi era. I mean, you couldn't even go in the Capitol and pray and worship. Thank God, a week ago, I was in the Capitol Rotunda playing my guitar, worshiping because the regime has changed. But that's what really motivated me. It's like, hey, listen, I can't be a person that cuts out my faith on this area of my life, or like it has to permeate and it has to guide me through everything. And so anyway, that was my journey. I think I was a bit optimistic, obviously, and I didn't realize how crazy that path was going to be. But
it
yeah,
it is crazy. It is. It's insane. And once you see behind the curtain and how sort of the sausage is made, Sean, you can't unsee it.
right,
And I ran for the House. I ran for the Senate. During my Senate campaign, it was Republicans who took me out too, by the way. So
right, right.
that your experience resonates with my own in that way. And I think both parties, like, here's the deal for me, Sean. I don't really care about political parties. Like, I'm a constitutional conservative. I love this country. The people for me come
Right.
first. Period. End of story. Um, and like you, when you're going to these, you said you're going to blue states, going to red states, going to blue areas, going to red areas. That was how we campaigned. I don't really. I went
Yeah.
there. I went and tried to build bridges with everybody because that's the job
Right.
description, right? And I feel like that was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, but it was the most dirty,
Right.
corrupt,
Right. Right.
terrible, like, and so, like, the people and the campaigning and just getting a chance to be there and lead among the people was the privilege of a lifetime. But
Right.
all the other stuff, it makes me
Right.
wonder, like, what kind of personality on both sides of the aisle is attracted to those types of positions, just the clinging to and keeping of power at all costs,
Hmm.
even if that means destroying the life of someone else,
Yeah.
Okay, but just, I got to ask you, how did you end up in the Oval Office with Trump, praying with President Trump? Because I've met him too. I think I don't think the media gives him a fair shake at all.
Yeah.
My meetings with him, I found him to be a good man who cared deeply for this country. Doesn't always say the right thing, but
Right.
who does,
Yeah.
right? Who does?
Right.
You got to tell me about that.
Yeah, it was basically a gathering of faith leaders, younger faith leaders from across America, and I got an invitation, and I was actually running at the time, and so yeah, it was just a wild experience. I mean, there's about 50 of us. I think the pictures definitely circulated the internet because um, I'm kind of standing next to him with my hand on him because I thought in the picture we were praying over him and we weren't. So I'm the only one that's like extending my hand towards him. But we basically went through and talked to all of his officials in the government, and we talked to Ivanka and Mike Pence and Sam Brownback and all these different guys about how they were incorporating faith into you know their policy decisions and stuff. And then kind of the end of it was going to meet Trump, and he just he's so unorthodox. He just had us all come into the Oval Office, all 50 of us, and he just said, "All right, you guys going to pray over me." And then he sat at his desk, and we laid hands and we prayed. And I mean, we didn't pray weak prayers. We prayed real bold prayers. And whether or not people agree with him, or they think his faith is real or not, or whatever, I just love a person that says, "I need prayer." There's something about the most powerful man in the world with the biggest platform in the world saying, "Hey guys, I need prayer." And he wasn't doing it for a photo op. We didn't have our phones and cameras out. I mean, this was like no one recorded the prayer. It was just a powerful moment. And he literally just said, "I need prayer." And we prayed over him, and it was powerful. And I tell anybody, if a president invites you in, I don't care which side of the aisle he's on, and he says, "Would you pray for me?" I'm there. I'm there the next day. However, that story that I just told you right now, I've never heard of that story in any other president in American history. So I think it was a pretty
Wow.
cool moment.
Do you ever think that, that kid from Montana, then California, and, doing missionary stuff all over the world, find yourself in the Oval Office someday praying over the President of the United States?
I would have never thought that in a million years. I think God is funny, and I think that it was like, I don't know, that door kind of opened right after I made my announcement that I was a long-haired worship leader that was going to run for Congress, and I just kind of felt like, all right, God, maybe if it was just for this moment, maybe if you had me, answer yes to do this, maybe it was just for a thing like this, then it was worth it. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it was really cool. It was a really cool experience, and I don't think, I've been with him several times since then, And of course we've gotten to do that similar thing with governors and leaders of other nations. So I don't think that that door's closed. I have a sense that we're gonna be seeing a shift in the coming days, and I think that kind of thing is going to be more common. We need that in America. We need people to
We
pray over the
do.
president. That's for sure.
We do. We do. And I think, did you happen to see that cartoon, that Disney cartoon that, I mean, Disney, I say this as somebody who grew up watching Disney films. Um, Boy, I feel like Disney has lost their way. And I mean, they're overtly
Oh man.
sexualizing our children.
Oh yes, a
And
hundred percent.
I, and I say this as somebody who's my own children love Disney. Um,
Right.
but Sean, I feel like I'm past the point where I can support a company like that, where there's a clear
Yeah.
agenda of
Yeah.
sexualizing our children, and I'm telling you, it's not okay. And some of the videos that I watched doing research and prep for this segment were you're actually out there taking on that fight, and man, God, I think that's great. How has that been for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I don't think I woke up one day and was like, we need to attack Disney. I think that, I think that because I grew up on them just like you, but I think that, hey, listen, you can mess with me, you can attack me, you can slander me, you can say all kinds of stuff about me, which, the media has done for years. But man, you start messing with my kids, it's a different ball game. Like, I mean, you're gonna see a warrior rise up because that's the primary role of parents, is to protect and raise their kids. So when Disney was mockingly advertising, and that whole leaked video behind the scenes of their producers saying that they are intentionally trying to indoctrinate kids and groom kids, I was like, okay, it is on. And that was something for me that it's like that's an area you don't play with. And I think that they overestimated or underestimated how parents would react as we started to host those protests. First we did it in Burbank Disney headquarters, then we did it in Disneyland California, then we did Disney World in Florida. um, the primary people that gathered with us were Hispanic moms, and they came out in
Wow.
force. I mean, it was wild, and they were not having this. And so, just like we saw in Virginia, what flipped the tide in that state is, was the parents. And I think that you're going to start seeing that even more as the intensity and the perversion of our education system continues. You're going to see parents rise up a lot more, and I think that's a good thing.
God, I think it's a great thing. And you talk about COVID being a major trigger point in your life, and I think that was the case for a lot of people, specifically with regards to the education of their children, having kids at home, right, doing virtual learning for the first time ever, basically, parent
Right.
working at the table on their laptop, kid doing virtual schooling, maybe in another room or maybe at the table, parent listening to some of the things that the teacher are saying and thinking like, is this what they're teaching my kid in school? So I think COVID really created this, at least in part, this movement of parents being more
Right.
interested in the direction
Right.
of their children's education. And but what sort of blows my mind, Sean, is that we're now at a point where the modern day left is advocating for and saying basically to parents, I'm going to have men dress up in women's underwear and come and dance in your
Right.
school to teach them about, LGBTQ, drag queen story hour, whatever. How has our culture gotten to this point?
Yeah, I mean it's insane. I mean the level of, again talking to somebody that grew up in the 90s, and I didn't even know what transgender nothing was. It's just like, and
Same, same.
we have the, and I think, going back to Hillary, why we really dodged a bullet in 2016 was because Hillary, one of her agendas and goals was to have the state control the entirety of education, and she wanted the state to be the parents and not the parents. And I think that going back to the ideologies and the demonic forces, not the boogeyman, like the real one. I think that they know that the next generation is key. If they can get the next generation, if they can get them confused, and if they can get them, dependent on the state and dependent on the government, and then then they got the nation. And I think that we're seeing that. Not, I think a lot of it started with prayer being taken out of school. I think that that was a huge thing, actually. And then in its place, we've seen no longer the dependency on God, but it's the dependency on the state, and it's dependency on the teachers. And yeah, we've come to a really sick place. I mean, we're in California. Thank God, it's a very easy state, surprisingly, to homeschool. So we
Hmm.
do that with our kids here, and it's a very, you know, very popular thing, obviously, in Southern California is to homeschool our kids. And so we've taken back control of that. And a lot of that started in COVID, where it was like, you know what? I'm not going to let you guys. Everything was canceled, and it's just like one disappointment after another in school. And I'm like, I'm not going to let you guys set the tone for how my kids are going to live life. We're going to do it ourselves. So we raised our hand to
I,
do it, and anyway, there's some encouragement for you parents out there. Like, there's a lot of grace to do that, and we never wanted to be the homeschool parents, but look at us now.
I know that. Who would have ever thought, But you're right. It does seem like there is a deliberate attempt from the state or from forces in this country to separate children from their parents, separate
Right,
children from their faith, and control the things that they're fed in school, hoping that parents don't pay attention to it.
right,
And in doing so, they become more reliant on the state, more reliant on state propaganda. Ultimately,
right,
you know, if they get their way, the next generation is easier to control. And
right.
that's why, Sean, what you're doing is so important. And I think so. Okay, so you got to tell me, what's next for you. How first of all,
Yeah.
how can I get involved? How can other people get involved?
Yeah, so we're actually starting a crazy initiative called the Kingdom to the Capital, where we're going to all 50 U.S. capitals in America, and we're hosting a Let Us Worship event, worship prayer. We're bringing the churches together from across the region. We're taking a stand for specific bills, pro-life bills, parent control in the education process. And yeah, it's going to be awesome. We're doing 27 capitals in 2023 and 23 capitals, I think, in 24. So by the time of the elections in November 24, the presidential election, we'll have gone to every capital in America. And
Wow.
we're starting in March, and we kind of kick off this tour. It's very ambitious. It's very expensive. It's very overregulated. We're getting permits at every single U.S. capital, and yeah, it's gonna be a wild thing. We're partnering with Turning Point USA Faith and several other organizations to pull this off. But yeah, it's gonna be amazing. And I don't think it's going to be anything that we've seen really in America, at least in my lifetime before. Um, thousands and thousands of people gathering at the steps of every state capital. And so you can find out information if you go to kingdomtothecapital.com. That's capital with an O. So kingdomtothecapital.com. And you can find out all the dates. I think we've published our first 9 tour stops. I think it's Baton Rouge, Jackson, Mississippi, Montgomery, Alabama, and then we go to Little Rock, Arkansas, Nashville, Tennessee, Jefferson City, Missouri, and then we go to Oklahoma City, Austin, Texas, and Kansas. So the first tour, and there'll be a lot more coming this year.
Well, man, that is great. The forces of good are on the march, man, and I am
Come on.
I'm I'm a believer, man. I am. I love what you're doing. I love that you're involved. You know, when you talk about being a conservative, right? It's an active word. We have to conserve something. The
Yeah,
values, the
yeah,
principles, the faith, all of the things that
yeah,
make this country exceptional and great. You're actively out there fighting for. You're not just talking about it, you're doing, and I admire that, Sean. And look, I could talk to you all day, but thank you for the time, and thank you for coming
yeah,
on the show. And you let
yeah.
me know if there's anything that I can do to help. I'm there 100%.
I will, man. I'll let you know. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, go to Kingdom to the Capital and sign up, everybody out there, so you can know when we're coming to your neck of the woods.
You heard the man, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, Sean, thank you, and we'll be in
Thank
touch.
you. All right. God bless.